Hello, Christ is in our midst. I'm Father Kevin Long of St. Elias Antiochian Orthodox Church in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Today is Wednesday, July 15th, 2020, and here are the readings for today. The first reading is from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 11 through 14, and then chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. Brethren, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall understand fully, even as I have been fully understood. So faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. Make love your aim, and earnestly desire the spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy. For one who speaks in a tongue speaks not to men but to God. For no one understands him, but he utters the mysteries in the Spirit. On the other hand, he who prophesies speaks to men for their upbuilding and encouragement and consolation. He who speaks in a tongue edifies himself, but he who prophesies edifies the church. Now I want you all to speak in tongues, but even more to prophesy. He who prophesies is greater than he who speaks in tongues, unless someone interprets, so that the church may be edified. And the gospel today is from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 17, verses 24 through 27, and chapter 18, verses 1 through 4. At that time, the collectors of the half-shekel tax went up to Peter and said, "Does not your teacher pay the tax?" He said, "Yes." And when he had come home, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of earth take toll or tribute? From their sons or from others?" And when he said, "From others," Jesus said to him, "Then the sons are free. However, not to give offense to them, but to go to the sea and cast a hook, and take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth you will find a shekel. Take it and give it to them for me and for yourself." At that time the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child, he is greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Today we remember the martyr Cyriacus and his mother, Jollita of Tarsus. And so we have readings that both make reference to children, because Cyriacus was himself a child. His mother was of noble rank, and she fled the court of Diocletian because she was a Christian, and she wished to continue to practice her Christian faith. And of course, if you were in the court at that point, you had to give your proper sacrifices to the pagan gods, or as she would call them, demons. So she was captured eventually and led to suffer. And in the midst of the suffering, her son saw her in the midst of her suffering. And Diocletian himself attempted to calm the boy and tried to get him to be silent while his mother was going through what she was going through. And he refused, saying himself, "I am a Christian, I wish to be with my mother." And so he perished, and then ultimately his mother did too. And so we have these readings that remind us that we indeed have that element of childhood within us. And especially if you take a look at what our Lord says in the gospel reading today, he reminds his disciples that they must become like children. Unless you turn and become like children, he says, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child, he is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So this serves as a very strong reminder to us that we have to be careful and not take things too seriously. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but that's not exactly what I mean. When we listen to what God expects us to do, and when we hear his commandments and are doers of his word, of course, it's a very proper and appropriate thing to do, to take that very seriously. But when we take a look at the world and we think, oh, well, I'm the chair of parish council, or I'm the chair of this organization, or I'm the chair of that organization, or even I'm a VP in a bank or something like that, we have to remember that those things those things are by no means the important things in life. Of course, it's important to have a vocation or just a job. Of course, it's important to be sober and have a degree of integrity in the things that you do. But when we think about who we are and what our nature is, a lot of times we let our titles get the best of us. And so we become proud and we become arrogant and we begin to think that the things that we do or say matter more than children. And that's where we run into error and mistakes and, sometimes cause unnecessary suffering. So it's important for us, I think, to be mindful of what Christ is trying to admonish us here. We need not be worried about the things of the world, especially about our prestige or our power, but instead we must have the humility of a child, so that when we encounter other people, we encounter them as we should, which is with grace, and as it says in the epistle reading, preaching illumination and consolation. These things are far more important than the other things. And so it is important for us to have a mind like a child, to have that degree of humility, to know that we don't have to have all the answers. And in fact, we don't deserve to know all the answers. But instead, we just follow after God. We do our best. We try to bring peace to a world that's all torn up. And we do these things out of love and out of charity, because these are the things that bring us closer to Christ's peace. So may God bless you and keep you, you and your family, and may his light shine constantly upon you, and may he give you his consolation and his peace. Have a great day.